The taxi pulled away before I reached the first step. I didn't ask him to wait. I already knew I wouldn't need a ride home. Mason opened the door, eyes immediately narrowing at the curb behind me. Why a taxi, Mom? Where's the BMW I gave you? I opened my mouth to answer, but Elise beat me to it. That car's mine now, she said lightly, brushing her hair behind one ear like she hadn't just knocked the wind out of me. I smiled. Or tried to. It came out strange, like my face didn't know how to hold the shape anymore. Mason turned toward her, brow furrowed, and then looked back at me, confused, maybe a little embarrassed. I didn't meet his eyes. Instead, I stepped inside, still in my coat. The smell of roasted garlic hit me first. Elise always overdid it, and then the sound of a pan clattering somewhere in the kitchen. I carried the little bowl of lemon wedges I'd brought, set it on the counter beside the sink, and adjusted it so it wouldn't wobble. My fingers were shaking. I didn't want to bother anyone today, I murmured. The taxi was easier. It wasn't true, but it was softer than the truth. Softer than admitting I didn't feel allowed to drive the car with my name still on the title. Elise had made that very clear, subtle at first, and then not at all. Mason didn't say anything. He stood in the hallway for a second too long, like he sensed something was off, but couldn't quite name it. Elise breezed past us, phone in hand, already talking about bills and errands, and a schedule I was never part of. I stood there, my hand still near the lemons. The tiled floor felt colder than I remembered. Mason closed the door slowly, his face unreadable. I wondered how much longer I could keep pretending nothing was wrong. How many more quiet dinners I could sit through before something cracked. I didn't know it then, but that crack was already forming right behind his eyes. The translation tool is currently unavailable in this environment. However, I can still manually translate or continue writing the next chapter. The day Mason handed me the keys, his hands shook a little. He wrapped both of mine in his and said, "You've driven everyone else your whole life, Mom. It's time you had something just for you." I had taught second grade for 31 years. I knew the names of all the kids who stayed late, who needed snacks, who didn't have gloves in winter. But I didn't know how to accept something like that. A gleaming black BMW with leather seats and a stereo I didn't know how to work. For a while it sat in the driveway like a strange jewel. I only used it on Sundays. It felt too new for grocery runs, too luxurious for errands. Then Elise rang the bell with a coffee in one hand and a tote bag over her shoulder. "Quick favor, Miriam, I've got an interview downtown. My car's acting up. Can I borrow the BMW?" She smiled like we were friends. Of course, I said yes. She brought it back late that night and tossed the keys into the fruit bowl like they were spare change. 2 days later, she needed it again. Just for a school thing. "I'll be back before noon." She wasn't, but I didn't ask. By the third week, I was checking the street before planning anything. The car was usually gone. Eventually, I just stopped planning. Mason caught me once at the bus stop. "Why aren't you driving?" he asked, frowning. I told him Elise needed it more. He nodded, trusting me. Then came the bills. "Just this once, Mom. We're short on the power bill." Then, the vet said it couldn't wait. Then we found a house, but we need help with the down payment just until we're settled. I didn't want them to worry. I told myself it was love, support, family. But when I checked my retirement account one night and saw the balance, something in me shrank. Not the money, though it hurt, but what it meant. I was disappearing in plain sight. And no one had noticed, not even me, until now. The translation tool you're trying to access isn't available in this environment, but I can still help by continuing your story manually. It was a Thursday when Elise handed me the folder. We were in the kitchen, the air thick with the smell of whatever she'd burned in the oven that night. "Just a formality," she said, smiling as if we were two women sharing a harmless secret. "Insurance paperwork. DMV stuff. Nothing big." She tapped her fingernail against the signature line. I looked down and saw my name typed neatly, already filled in. I nodded slowly, flipping the page back over, pretending to read. "I'll look it over later," I said. Her smile slipped just for a second. Then it was back, glossy and polite. "Sure, no rush." I never signed it. That night, I tucked the folder between the cookbooks in my kitchen. The next morning, I moved the title to a new hiding spot, wedged inside the lining of my winter coat. And I opened a new bank account under my name alone with what little I had left from the retirement fund. It wasn't much, but it was mine. After that, Elise stopped asking. She just started referring to the BMW as if it had always been hers. My car needs gas. I left something in my back seat. The dealership said my model's due for a service. I didn't correct her. I just started leaving the house earlier. Took the long way to the grocery store. Learned the bus schedule by heart. The black leather seats the gift Mason had been so proud to give me became something I wasn't allowed to touch. It was easier that way. Less confrontation. Less pretending to smile while Elise talked over me, around me, through me. But the silence got heavier. Each quiet moment became a stone on my chest. Even Mason had started to believe it, I think. The casual way he'd hand Elise the keys without glancing at me, or how he'd ask her if her car needed anything this week. I had protected the title, yes, but somehow I had let everything else slip, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending it didn't hurt. Dinner at their house used to feel warm, familiar. Now the lights felt too bright, the air too loud. Elise greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek and a flurry of movement pots, clanging drawers, opening her voice, bouncing around the kitchen like it had something to prove. "I've been swamped," she announced. "Emails, school runs errands. I'm barely keeping up." She didn't look at me when she added, "That's why I need the car more than anyone." Mason stood by the fridge, arms crossed, watching her. His eyes drifted toward me. "You had doctor's appointments this week, right?" he asked. My throat closed. I gripped the container of salad I'd brought and forced a smile. I rescheduled. He frowned. "But last week, you said I mixed up the dates I cut in quickly." "It's next month." Elise hummed like she hadn't heard. She turned up the burner and began stirring a pot with exaggerated care. The conversation moved on her job, a neighbor's dog. Something Mason didn't respond to right away. He kept looking at me. Not suspicious, not angry. Just trying to see something that wasn't there before. I kept my voice light. I laughed at Elise's stories. I offered to set the table. I placed the forks with quiet precision, aligning them like something small I could still control. During dinner, Mason passed me the water jug and asked softly, "You're sure you're okay, Mom?" "I'm fine," I whispered. "Really?" But I saw it. The crease between his brows didn't go away. He watched Elise too now, when she reached for the car keys on the counter, when she said she needed the BMW for another early meeting, when she talked over me without pause. After dessert, Mason offered to drive me home. I thanked him, then shook my head. "Not yet," I said. "I'll call a cab." He didn't argue, but his silence felt different this time. Less like distance and more like something waking up. Something he didn't quite understand yet, but it was coming. He showed up the next morning without calling. I heard the knock and knew it wasn't Elise. Mason stood at the door with a quiet kind of urgency in his eyes. "Just wanted to check in," he said. No smile, no small talk. I let him in, suddenly aware of how worn the place looked. The patch of carpet near the sofa frayed the pantry, half full, a single pair of walking shoes by the door scuffed at the toes. He didn't say anything, just looked. Then his eyes landed on the stack by the counter. Bills, insurance copays, a few prescriptions I hadn't filled yet, and underneath it, the envelope. I knew which one he'd open first. He reached for it slowly, as if giving me a chance to stop him. I didn't. Inside was the transfer receipt for the down payment. The one Elise said they'd handle later. His thumb ran along the bottom of the page where my name was printed in fading ink. "You used your savings," he said quietly. "For us." I nodded. He stared at the envelope, then at me. "I didn't want to be a burden," I said. It came out smaller than I meant it to. His jaw clenched. "You weren't. You aren't." He stepped back, still holding the paper like it might catch fire. "But someone's been lying to me. I didn't say her name. I didn't have to." He walked toward the dining table and pulled out a chair, sat with his elbows on his knees like he used to when he scraped his knee as a boy. Silent, stunned. "I thought you were fine," he murmured. "You always said you were. I didn't want you to worry." He didn't reply. "Then, Mom, I need to see everything." So I opened the drawer by the fridge. He looked at me and I nodded once. Inside was the rest of it. The bills, the wire transfers, the forms Elise asked me to sign. He started pulling them out one by one. Mason called that morning and said dinner. Just us three. His voice didn't leave room for discussion. By the time I arrived, he was already there, sitting at the kitchen island, with a folder closed tight in front of him. Elise looked surprised, but masked it fast. "Another dinner," she said. "You two should have just texted." Mason didn't smile. He tapped the folder once. "We need to talk." Elise rolled her eyes, reaching for the fridge. "I'm making pasta." "You want some?" "No," Mason said. "I want answers." He opened the folder. Neatly stacked inside were bills with my name on them. Transfer receipts from my bank. The DMV papers Elise once handed me, and the title still unsigned, tucked neatly behind it. He slid the folder toward her. Elise didn't touch it. She offered, she said simply. I never forced her. I stayed still, hands folded in my lap. This wasn't mine to carry anymore. Mason's voice was calm, but the edge in it was new. You didn't force her. You made her believe she had no choice. Elise laughed, short and sharp. This is ridiculous. He didn't flinch. The car, the money, the way you talk over her like she's not even standing here. She never said anything, Elise snapped. If it bothered her, she should have said something. That's the thing, Mason said quietly. She never does. And you knew that. The silence hung between us. Elise's hands were tight around the counter edge. Mason stood. Give me the keys, he said. Elise's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The keys, Elise. She didn't move. I could almost see the calculations spinning behind her eyes, the realization that something was slipping out of her hands, and she couldn't stop it. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He just waited. And in that stillness, something shifted. She reached for her purse. Elise stood with her arms folded, jaw tight. So, this is what we're doing now, she said. Humiliate me in my own kitchen. Mason didn't answer. He stood by the counter, calm, unmoving. The folder remained where he'd left it, its contents still untouched by her hands. You're really siding with her, Elise asked, voice rising. After everything I've done for this family? Mason's reply came low. If what you've done is take what's not yours and call it help, then yes. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I won't stay in a house where I'm treated like a criminal. He looked her in the eye. Then don't act like one. No one yelled. No one begged. She disappeared down the hall. I could hear drawers opening the soft zip of a bag. The front door clicked open a few minutes later, then shut with a finality that echoed down the walls. I sat still, my hands clasped in my lap, my breath shallow. Not bitter, not triumphant, just still. Mason walked over quietly, placing the BMW keys in my hand. I looked at them for a moment before meeting his eyes. It should have always been yours, he said. The metal pressed against my palm, familiar and foreign at once. I nodded, unsure if I should thank him, or apologize, or both. Instead, I stood and set the keys gently on the table between us. I'll need to register the title, I said softly. He nodded. I'll take you. And just like that, Something in the air between us began to settle, less like a storm passing, more like a room being aired out after years of stale silence. I walked over to the window and cracked it open. The breeze that came in didn't carry judgment, only air. Fresh, cold, honest. Mason stepped away to make tea, and I stood there, finally breathing. Mason insisted on driving me home. We didn't speak much on the way, just the soft hum of tires against the road and the low click of the turn signal at every light. When we pulled into my apartment's parking lot, he parked and got out before I could move. He opened my door slowly, like he didn't want to rush the moment. "Come look," he said. I stepped out and looked at the BMW for the first time in months, really looked. The rear bumper was scuffed. A long scratch ran across the passenger side deep enough to catch the light. Inside, the upholstery was stained, the cup holder sticky. The faint smell of fast food and perfume lingered like something trying too hard to cover up something else. I said nothing. Mason stood next to me, his hands in his pockets, his mouth pressed tight. "I thought she was taking care of it," he murmured. I shrugged. "It's just a car." He turned toward me gently, shaking his head. "No, it wasn't just a car. It was a promise. And we broke it." I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the keys as he took them out of his coat and placed them in my hand carefully, like he was trying not to disturb something fragile. "Start over with it," he said. "Start over with me." My fingers curled around the keys, cool and solid. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure I could, not because I didn't believe him, but because the words might break if I spoke them too soon. I walked up the stairs slowly, Mason just behind me. We didn't speak until we reached the door. "Do you want to come in?" I asked. He nodded once. "Yeah, if that's okay." I opened the door and stepped aside, letting the light spill out into the hallway. The next morning, I left early. Mason had offered to come with me, but I told him I needed to do this alone. At the DMV, I handed over the paperwork with steady hands. The woman behind the counter clicked through her computer, barely glancing up. When she confirmed the title was still under my name, I felt something unstick inside my chest. "Would you like to update your contact information?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "And I'd like a fresh copy of the title, please. A few signatures, a new printout," and it was done. I didn't drive to a store. I didn't go back to Mason's house or stop for groceries. I drove northwest until the city gave way to quiet. Just outside Boulder, I pulled into a gravel lot at the base of a trail. I used to hike years ago, before the buses. Before the silence, before the steady erosion of things I thought I had time to hold on to. The air was sharp against my cheeks as I stepped out, but it woke me. The kind of cold that doesn't scold, just reminds. There were no voices asking for errands, no to-do lists waiting on my kitchen table, just pine dirt and sky. I walked slowly, unsure at first. My knees ached a little. My breath shortened on the incline. But my heart didn't protest. It moved with me. About 20 minutes up the trail widened to a clearing. The view was simple. Trees, a slope, sky. But it was mine. I stood still. The wind pulled at the ends of my coat. The keys were in my pocket, resting against my leg. Not heavy, not demanding, just there. I turned toward the trail again, found my rhythm, and began walking forward. When I got back to the apartment, there was a small envelope tucked under my door. My name written in Mason's handwriting, a little crooked like always. Inside was a card. "Thank you for everything. Please don't disappear again." I sat with those words for a long time. Not because they hurt, but because they didn't. Because I wasn't disappearing, I had just needed to come back to myself first. That weekend, I called him. We didn't talk about Elise. We didn't talk about the car or the money or the folder on the kitchen island. We just talked about the cold snap coming in, about how his office finally fixed the coffee machine, about the bookstore near his work that I used to love. It became a rhythm. Every Sunday. No requests, no guilt. No keeping score. Just his voice on the line, steady and present. I joined a walking group in town. Nothing big. Just a few women around my age who liked early mornings and didn't mind hills. We talked about weather books and shoes that didn't rub. I found I liked being out of breath for reasons that had nothing to do with worry. On Wednesdays, I signed up for a memoir writing class at the community center. The instructor was younger than Mason, but she listened like my students used to. Like what I had to say still mattered. The BMW sat out front. Not as a symbol, not as a trophy, not even as a burden, just a car. My car. I didn't polish it every day. I didn't guard it like a treasure, but when I turned the key, the engine came alive. The seat warmed up. The road felt solid under the tires. And for the first time in a very long while, the quiet in my life didn't feel like erasure. It felt like peace. It felt like something I had finally earned.